Fate chose me to govern swine. In my old age, I am become a swineherd. Do you think this boy has drunk enough wine?
I think he's drunk enough, Lord.
So do I. Now he is happy. Homer, you would not know that. You were educated in army camps only. You will know enough to be a swineherd.
Episode 16 of the Cult of Matt and Mark Cult Film Review Podcast. I'm Matt.
And I'm Mark.
And this week our film is Caligula, released in 1980, directed by Tinto Brass and Bob Guccione of Penthouse fame. Mm-hmm. It stars the cinematic talents of Malcolm McDowell, Peter O'Toole, John Gielgud, Shakespearean actress Helen Mirren. But you probably really wouldn't know it if you read the reviews on this movie. So,
I didn't read any of the reviews on this movie.
There's one review.
I guess I didn't see the point. I mean, it seemed like a pretty solid film, all in all. I mean, not a great film, but I didn't see anything too terribly bad about it.
This is one of...
oh, no. I should have read Ebert's review.
Ebert's famed 0-star reviews.
He gave it 0?
Absolutely 0.
Wow, I'm surprised. There's certainly some stuff in there that certainly deserves more than a 0. What do you have to say?
Well, we'll read the first sentence here. Now, he wrote this circa 1980, so he was in the zeitgeist of the era. Caligula is sickening, utterly worthless, shameful trash. If it is not the worst film I ever seen, that makes it all the more shameful. People with talent allowed themselves to participate in this travesty. Disgusted and unspeakably depressed, I walked out of the film after 2 hours of its 170-minute length.
Wow.
Yeah.
You walked out?
Walked out.
And that's the full-length, full pornographic version.
Yeah, because we watched the 20th anniversary edition, complete, unedited, and unrated, and that clocked in at 156 minutes, so about 2.5 hours. So
he had a longer version.
Yeah, I don't. Maybe he didn't quite get the minutes.
I think this movie went through a few different cuts.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But anyway, let me finish this one. Disgusted and unspeakably depressed, I walked out of the film after 2 hours of its 170-minute length. That was on Saturday night, as a line of hundreds of people stretched down Lincoln Avenue, waiting to pay $7.50 apiece to become eyewitnesses to shame.
Well, $7.50, that's pretty expensive for the 80s.
Back in the early 80s.
Yeah. Wow.
I don't know
Must have been a nice theater. He's in Chicago, too. So.
And maybe pornos were at a premium back then.
Well, I mean, I guess porno theaters hadn't been supplanted by VHS quite yet.
I don't think
but
this
was close.
I don't think this was. I don't know. There was a cinematic version that was.
But this is not a pornographic. Well, I mean, this movie has pornographic-like elements, but it's still a film. It's not a piece of pornography.
I don't know what.
Maybe that's what Ebert's trying to say.
I don't know what under what condition Ebert went to saw the movie. If it was in a quote unquote porno theater, or if it was maybe an art house that happened to play risque film.
No, this got a regular release. Look, it had great actors in it.
Yeah.
And the production was good.
Yeah, it was.
And I thought it had a pretty good storyline for what it was. I don't know. I mean,
let me.
In the absence of real pornography, maybe you would use this to excite you in a sort of lascivious way. But I don't see why you would in such a day and age when you could find any sort of regular old pornography for that purpose.
Back in 1980?
You wouldn't sit down for 2.5 hours and watch this movie just for titillation.
In a public
Plus,
theater.
it's really violent, sort of gross.
I'm going to read the back of our 20th century DVD edition.
What year was this released? Did it say on there?
20th century. Sorry, 20th anniversary edition.
Oh, so it was around 2000.
Around 2000. And actually, the transfer was pretty terrible.
No, it's definitely transferred from a television tape, like those big tapes you use in television, because it's interlaced pretty badly if you watch it on a computer. If you don't deinterlace it, you can tell it's definitely like a 480 interlaced.
It's grainy. It was really grainy.
I wonder if they ever retransferred this for a Blu-ray release. It might be nice to see.
Well, we'll talk about the various editions, but there's an Imperial DVD set that just came out that has 3 DVDs in it, which is packed with so many extras that I think you would have to be really stoned on a very boring Friday night to watch everything that's in it. But I guess there's commentary by both Helen Mirren and Malcolm McDowell.
Now that would be fun to see. Well, Malcolm McDowell's sort of a goofball, but Helen Mirren, that'd be interesting.
Well, I think what they did is they had to own the movie at a certain point. They had to, because everybody, basically it was sort of a circular firing squad during the production, especially with the writer, director, and Bob Guccione.
See, that's funny. I didn't really, as part of researching this film, because I had seen it sort of semi in passing in my early 20s, and I didn't really look at the whatever was surrounding it. I took the film and added some historical aspect things to my understanding, but I didn't look at it as whatever hoo-ha was going on at the time.
You gave it probably an honest viewing.
I gave it an honest viewing. I wouldn't have given it 0 stars, that's for sure.
Okay, let me read the back of the DVD here, because it's actually the DVD comment on the back is I think funny. Caligula may very well be the most controversial film in history. Only one movie dares to show the perversion behind Imperial Rome, and that movie is Caligula, the epic story of Rome's mad emperor. All the details of his cruel, bizarre reign are revealed right here. His unholy sexual passion for his sister. Yes, we had some incest there.
Yeah, that way may or may not be historically accurate.
Right. His marriage to Rome's most infamous prostitute. Oh, Helen Mirren she was a prostitute? I thought she was like a priestess of Isis.
She was a floozy who liked to bed anybody. I don't know if she's supposed to be a prostitute or not.
Right. His fiendishly inventive means of disposing of those who would oppose him, and more. Not for the squeamish, not for the prudish, Caligula will shock and arouse you as it reveals the deviance and decadence beneath the surface of the grandeur that was once Rome.
Well, that is one poorly written back of the DVD.
Boy, is it ever.
Boy, they really shat that bit of text out.
Well,
whoever wrote that certainly wasn't a writer by trade.
I'm guessing something...
it's like something I would write.
Yeah, I'm guessing probably somebody in the dying Penthouse empire.
There's an empire that's died.
And is it dead? Is Penthouse gone?
No, the magazine's still published as far as I know.
Wow, who the fuck goes to, pick up a Penthouse these days? Truckers who have no internet connection?
I guess. God, I haven't... I think we talked about this on another podcast about the death of the pornography store.
Yeah, we mentioned it briefly in American Werewolf in London.
Oh, did we? Oh, because they had one of that great scene takes place in the old porno theater.
I just have not even perused the back of the Korean Grocer's magazine racks.
It's still there, though, so... Look, the Korean Grocer's not keeping it there just for shits and giggles. He's keeping it there because he moves product.
Well, they usually have a pretty big arsenal of spank mags behind, and it's always the Korean
still
Grocers.
Selling.
It's always the Korean Grocers too that are peddling that stuff. I never really understood. I mean, I guess they know what sells, so that's what they sell.
Yeah, they're not selling it because they're big supporters of freedom of speech.
Yeah, right. Well, it
must still sell.
I just find it interesting. I don't know. I mean, to each their own.
But it's not anywhere near the empire that Guccione had and the money he had back in the late 70s.
I don't know when he got his start, and I guess I could do the research here, but it's not really worth it.
I didn't really read up on him.
Well, Bob Guccione, and then there was Bob Guccione Jr., who was another magazine mogul, and his claim to fame was Spin Magazine, and I think it still is.
Oh, he branched out into more mainstream publications.
Well,
not a bad idea.
Yeah.
You got all the people who know how to publish and sell magazines, you might as well.
So
it's a good idea to diversify with the skill set you already have.
Penthouse was the sleazy competitor to Playboy at the time.
I mean, I had some penthouses from the late 70s, early 80s. Good stuff. That's quality stuff. In fact, I think it'd be fun to have a collection of some of that early Penthouse and Playboy stuff.
I think did they do away with the taste? I mean, because Penthouse or Playboy always marketed itself, or Hugh Hefner always marketed itself as a very tasteful magazine.
Well, it was pretty good. It was pretty good back in the day, but once we got into the 90s, everything went to shit, and everything got airbrushed. And then everybody started shaving their pubic hair off for some strange reason, where it's de rigueur these days for people to do that.
Right.
Which is really, still strikes me as strange. I guess it's maybe part of becoming an old man. See, I can't believe the kids these days. All the crazy stuff they do.
There was none of these aestheticians around in my day.
Whatever the case, I don't find it as attractive as a nicely full-haired women. There's something about that time period. Maybe it's because it's what I was really exposed to early, even though, maybe I was first becoming acquainted with pornography around 90. It seems like the stuff I was acquainted with was old porno mags that somehow came into my possession.
Me
too. Those were these penthouses from the late 70s and early 80s.
It was, in my case,
voluptuous, naturally breasted, and
in my case, it was what was laying around the house.
Oh, see, my dad didn't own any pornography.
Okay. All right. So, but maybe it's sort of like society carries with it its what's the idea of beauty, and that changes over history.
Yeah.
Just like you had very voluptuous, some would consider overweight women being sort of the fashion of the 17, 1800s.
And that sort of gets burnt into you when all those hormones are raging.
Right.
And that gets seared as like female archetype in your head.
Right.
And it never changes.
So now there's
no matter how many tits they bolt on women, it's never going to look good.
So now, like, if you go to some of the online porn sites, they have everything broken out in the categories. And, like, hairy is actually a category now.
Well,
and
I don't want to see some lady with a unibrow.
Well, yeah, I understood, but it's almost like a fetishist thing that you're into hairy porn.
I think that's just a marketing gimmick.
Maybe it seems a little bit weird though that you almost feel deviant for wanting your pornography to be a little bit more au naturel as opposed to the I don't know, almost weirdly sterile. Although now it's sort of shaved with crazy tattoos and piercings and everything.
Yeah, people getting tatted up.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, look, there's all types out. I guess it's really exploded, so it runs the gamut from one direction to the other, and that's fine. Whatever. I don't. God, what we are like 12 minutes in, we're already talking about pornography inside of the film.
It's hard not to talk about pornography when you're talking about Caligula.
I guess really the pornography. When I remember seeing it, when I first saw it seemed like the pornography really stood out, and almost like it was not incongruous with the rest of the film. And besides one scene, I think what people would consider the pornographic elements, and sometimes people define pornography as having no artistic value. And I when I say pornography in the sense of this movie, I'm saying something that does have artistic value. I just mean sexually explicit. I only found one scene to be incongruous to the movie. I felt that all the other highly sexually explicit material seemed to blend rather well. Even though I'd heard that Tinto Brass and Guccione had filmed those scenes separately.
Let's talk a little bit about the production.
I was surprised how well they cut together.
I'm going to just give a brief rundown of the production without getting too detailed or reading the Wikipedia blow by blow, but no pun intended. So originally the screenplay was written by Gore Vidal, and it was going to be produced by a couple of individuals, the Rossellinis, as an unproduced. It was going to be it was unproduced, but it was going to be like a mini series type of thing.
Oh yeah, I think it'd be pretty good. TV.
And it was going to be sort of a modestly budgeted historical drama.
Okay. I mean, they've done that with all the other great emperors of Rome. Why not Caligula?
Sure. They didn't quite have the money to kick it into gear to do the production, and this is the weird one, and I think this sowed the seed for its sordid and bizarre production history. Gore Vidal, who's the famous author, I have not read any Gore Vidal, but
Me neither. I'm really not that familiar.
he's a bit of a what's the right word? He's a bit of a dissenter. No, that's not the right word.
A little bit of a social misfit.
No, he's not a social misfit. He's oh man, I'm always terrible when I'm trying to think of.
All right. Well, whatever.
Anyway, he's
He's
subversive, maybe slightly subversive.
Okay.
That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yeah, with what he writes, he's kind of a left wing guy and writes fairly subversive stuff. And,
Okay.
he was pretty much on the tirade during the George W. Bush years, so whatever that tells.
W. Bush.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
He was on Bill Maher a few times. And anyway, he contacted media mogul and Penthouse founder and publisher Bob Guccione.
He reached out to Guccione.
Yeah.
For money.
For money. Which
Because that was quite an empire. He had a lot of cash.
Well, yeah. I mean, pornography was a boom business back in those days.
It was just before it tanked.
Just before it tanked.
Well, it's just before these big moguls tanked. The industry boomed in general.
Yeah.
The lo-fi craze.
Right. And which is really sowing the seeds of its destruction at that point. So
You think him reaching out to Guccione?
didn't sow the seeds of the destruction of maybe the original vision that Gore Vidal had intended. Like he wanted to, make something that was obviously more dramatic and historical in nature. But Guccione.
What did Guccione? Well, actually, if we're going to talk about Guccione, I have there was a special on this disc. I don't know if you watched it.
I watched it at one time. I didn't give it a watch this time, but yeah, there's a Gore Vidal
I looked
interview.
and they had Guccione speaking quite a bit.
Okay, well let's
So
hear
I have a little excerpt to sort of make you think what Guccione maybe brought to the movie, and maybe what he brought other than money wasn't the best thing.
Do we need to set up anything more, or can we
All
just
you
go
need to
into
do is imagine Guccione sitting there in a blousy man's shirt.
Did he wear those?
Yes,
I
it was sort of a creamy color. About 4 or 5 of the buttons were done, so it was buttoned just above the belly button, and he had 6 or 7
An Italian
gold.
Italian horn necklace.
No, he had gold and necklace, but he had a large marble table that he was sitting at. And here he's talking about how he brought it all together.
All right.
And there is no greater concentration of this sort of talent anywhere else in the world. Italy is the best. And also because Italy is, and particularly Rome, is the home of Danilo Donati, whom I personally feel, and I think a lot of critics will agree with me, is the very best art director that a film like this could have. Danilo has won at least 3 or 4 Academy Awards. He's probably the finest costume and set designer in the world. I wanted him. He was part of the package of excellence that we were putting together.
Oh.
You remind me of Donald Trump, a real blowhard.
Oh man.
He's the best. He's won 3 or 4 Academy Awards. I'm not sure.
Okay, the person he was speaking of was Danilo Donati, who was Federico Fellini's art director.
Uh-huh.
And Federico Fellini is the famous Italian director whose famous films are Satyricon and 8. I want to say 8 Mile, but that's not 8.5. Okay, 8.5.
There was definitely some Satyricon elements in this movie.
The living statues, or the statues on the island of Capri when
the Capri sex whatever hall.
Yeah, of basically circus freaks doing porn in the background, which is really,
It's too bad because I found Peter O'Toole to have the best portrayal of any of the roles.
Peter O'Toole was...
I thought his job as Tiberius was really the best.
Right. So, before we get too far into talking about the film, I just want to run through the rest.
But anyways, maybe that gives you an idea. He came in with money and with big ideas.
Yeah. And it was his film.
And no expertise.
And it was his film.
Yeah.
So he hires Danilo Donati, and he hires Tinto Brass. And Tinto Brass, I don't know much about him. He was a young Italian director at the time, and had done some, I guess, erotic films that Guccione appreciated but probably didn't understand. To direct Caligula. Mm-hmm. Gore Vidal said something offhanded about...
Now, Gore Vidal reached out to him.
Tinto Brass?
No, he reached out to Guccione
Right,
originally.
it's all Gore Vidal's fault, really.
Yeah.
So he has only himself to blame. So he reached out. Guccione hired Tinto Brass to film Caligula. And then Gore Vidal pissed off Tinto Brass, and then Gore Vidal was basically fired at that point.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, and he got I think that actually went to court or something at one point.
To try to stop the production?
No.
Take his name off of it?
Something like that.
Because they surely used his name to sell it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Famous Gore Vidal's Caligula. Well, it was going to be called Gore Vidal's Caligula, and then it had been changed so much, and so many people Guccione was so pissed off that he didn't obviously allow that to happen. So Tinto Brass then went ahead and filmed it, and then Guccione and Tinto started getting into it. And
oh, really?
Well, there was some obviously. Guccione said when Gore Vidal first showed up with the screenplay, said, "I'll do your movie, but it has to have way more sex and
So it has to have some more explicit sex.
Yeah, it has to have some really explicit sex, and the reason that Guccione wanted to do that was to expand his penthouse empire into, other realms of media, I guess.
Plus, he brought a bunch of the penthouse pets with him.
Right,
which weren't really the best for some of these roles.
Well,
they weren't the best.
That's right. Well, and then that was one criticism that Guccione had of Brass was that he had packed the film with too many flabby, ugly women because he didn't want to use Guccione's
pets.
His stable of penthouse pets.
Yeah, they were a little unmatching when they'd come up.
Yeah, what did he considered the women that Brass had put in the movie as fat, ugly, and wrinkled old women. So after basically Brass handed over the cans to Guccione and divorced himself from the whole effort.
Oh, really? He left the film production.
Maybe I'm hacking up the story. I'm trying to kind of paraphrase here without getting it too tedious.
We don't have to be 100% accurate. We just have to make a good story.
And so Guccione took it and recut it and refilmed some of the, I wouldn't even call it hardcore at this point.
Well, you got to think about where did the sex come in? I mean, where were the real explicit sex scenes? And I sort of tried to pay attention to them because I wanted to see.
Like you're talking about like full blown like oral and
penetration shots.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some. Well, I think the first time is we see it on the Isle of Capri, in the events that are happening during the opening audio, when Tiberius is giving the young Caligula some guidance.
Oh, as they're walking through kind of the hall
there
of
were
like
some,
the living
there were
statues.
Some pretty
right?
explicit things in there. You're thinking that Guccione didn't refilm any of that business.
Well, there's some close-ups that are hard to actually pull. Like
I wonder if Guccione added some stuff there.
Well, it's weird because you see like there's some shots of like hardcore porn, and then a second later you see Peter O'Toole and Malcolm McDowell walk by the two individuals who are basically having sex in the background. So it's as if it's going on concurrently. It didn't seem like it was filmed
separately.
A lot of instances didn't seem like that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm wondering. I think maybe Brass put a fair amount of rather hardcore
pornography.
Yeah, well, I mean, some sexually explicit business in there.
Yeah. Well, then there's the most obvious one, which is the two penthouse pets, and I don't know their names, who are voyeuristically looking at the menage a trois. With,
between Drusilla and Caligula and
what's her name? The Helen Mirren character.
Helen Mirren's character. I forget her name.
Let me look real quick. Her Cassionia. Cassionia, the I guess what they call the prostitute, but she seemed more like the priestess of Isis.
And then they sort of interspersed this lesbian scene between two of the penthouse pets. That was a little incongruous. You can tell that it started at first. The back and forth seemed all right, but then it got a little goofy, especially with these fake orgasm things that the female characters were.
Those.
But we are focusing all on the porn. Well, let's just keep it. Let's keep it all porn all the time.
I think
Enya, I think that some guys jerk off into a cup,
right?
And then she uses that as a skin cream.
Yeah,
I think that was in the regular film because Malcolm McDowell's there and he takes a little bit of puts it on his head because he's worried he's going bald.
So it seems a little odd.
So that was pretty explicit. That must have been filmed by Tinto. That wasn't added.
It seems a little odd. I mean, either Guccione did a really good job of splicing in the hardcore parts, or
there's some parts where I think he did splice it in. The big boat scene where Caligula commandeers the senator's wives to act as prostitutes.
and then there's a very conspicuous blowjob scene there.
Oh yeah, I thought that was actually pretty good.
Me too.
I thought that was a pretty good scene. I thought it fit it because the music crescendoed.
It was like the drum beat to war, and then you saw all these dandied up Roman soldiers parading underneath the boat, and then every few seconds it would pan to
there'd be like sort of simulated sexual activity, sort of, and then there'd be like full penetration.
Yeah.
And then there was that one blowjob where the two penthouse pets are really going at some guy's big member, right? I'm pretty sure Guccione must have added some stuff in there. Maybe it wasn't perfectly fit, but I thought it was pretty nicely edited together. I thought it was pretty well done. Well, I'll be honest, that didn't seem bad to me.
You and Ebert must beg to differ, I guess, because whatever. Well, okay, so we went right into the ditch on.
Well, we got through it. Now we're out the other side.
Yeah. So I guess are we done talking about the pornography now?
I guess so. Be quite honest, the whole explicit sex aspect of the film didn't seem like the most important part.
It didn't seem like the most.
Obviously at the time, it was the most interesting part. I'm sure that's if they released something similar today, it'd have to be the same thing.
Well, this film is. I think why this film has such, I wouldn't call it staying power. It has longevity for good, bad, and different. Is because it's a hybrid. The movie's a hybrid.
Yeah, it's a hybrid you don't see.
And the interesting...
So improbable.
It's extremely improbable. And the thing we always think about with... I always think of Boogie Nights and porno movies. Like back in the era, the movie was basically a loose structure, like a really poor, shitty plot to segue porn scenes together.
This movie?
No, traditionally back in the Boogie Nights era, 70s era filmmaking. When you had to get people into the theaters, and there's that whole scene in Boogie Nights where
you tried to you sort of parodied movies.
Yeah,
it was just what people did.
Sure,
it was before these days where it's just like sex scene, sex scene.
Well, now it's
wrap it up.
Yeah, now it's just kind of like
they still do that every once in a while with these high production pornos, like Pirates of the Caribbean knockoff.
Oh,
stuff.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That fares a little bit beyond me, I think. But but this is more or less a movie that has pornography kind of attached to it.
Guccione's hands aren't invisible.
No.
I'm amazed considering probably how much of a sort of a dullard straight businessman Guccione is. How this movie turned out as good as it did, especially if there was all this infighting between the screenwriter and the director. I thought it turned out pretty good for all that craziness.
Well, there's shitloads of cuts, apparently, of this film, even when it was released. We saw, I guess, what would be considered
the Millennium Cut?
The unrated 156-minute version.
No, the uncut 20th edition DVD. It's like number 10.
Yeah. So it's probably the most complete film at the time, at least, and I don't know.
No, maybe only because they re-edited it.
When it went to the UK, it was at like 149 minutes, and I think there might have been like a few minutes that were just beyond the pale that they couldn't handle.
Be quite honest, you could probably cut out the more explicit stuff, and the movie would be fine.
There was an R-rated cut released in 1981, which was 105 minutes long, so it took out 50 whole minutes of film.
I don't think it'd be that. I mean, it would be a pretty pedestrian movie, but the set pieces were pretty nice, and some of the acting wasn't too bad. A little too much chewing of the scene by McDowell.
And there was the Capri scene, which was probably one of the better scenes of the movie because it had Peter O'Toole and Sir John Gielgud and Malcolm McDowell all playing off each other. And if you kind of are able to sort of put the blinders on and just pay attention to at least some of the acting and some of the words being said.
Well, if you let that whole sex freak show just be the backdrop.
Right. It actually was pretty solid.
I liked all that stuff. That was probably one of my more favorite parts of the movie. I just thought I think maybe they were sticking more to Gore Vidal's script at that point.
You get a lot of that. Like, you get a lot of
That was earlier in the production, maybe.
right. And Malcolm McDowell was solid throughout the whole
He
film.
wasn't quite as over the top at that point either, because the
No.
character really goes crazy. And
Yeah, yeah. So, especially after Drusilla dies of the fever, and then he has sort of that
he goes out to the people.
that semi-necrophilia scene with her, where he's just kind of like,
I didn't get a necrophilia feeling. He just seemed really. I know what you're saying because he was kissing her all over.
Yeah.
I don't really think it was. It's not a sexual thing. It was more of a terrible loss. He was
Right.
probably the only person that he could honestly be honest with was his sister Drusilla, and I think he was just overcome with grief at that point,
sure,
which he was historically in reality.
yeah,
Also overcome with grief. I didn't see anything sexual about that, even though they're naked and he rips her clothes off. I don't think there's none of the. I think he's just devastated and sort of just acting.
And then
I thought that was pretty well done.
and then he hits the streets of Rome and ends up in jail one night.
Does a couple magic tricks. That's funny. He meets that sort of barbarian guy, and they do the disappearing
coin trick.
coin trick.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty funny.
that was a pretty.
The barbarian guy takes a gold coin, hides it in some unconscious woman's genitals, and pulls out 2 gold coins.
Yeah.
It was pretty nice. And then Caligula hides his signet ring in like under the scrotum of the
Oh right.
of the barbarian guy. And then he takes the barbarian guy under his wing
Yeah, and
brings him into the
he's
court.
with him throughout the whole
the rest of the
film.
movie. He's like his buddy.
It's like I don't know if it was like his Joker or something, but he was there like up till the very bitter end.
Yeah, he gets killed at the same time Caligula does.
So maybe did you read anything up on the actual Caligula?
Yeah, I mean, I just looked around the Wikipedia entries, which are pretty good. People dog Wikipedia all the time, but I'll be honest, it's better than the Encyclopedia Britannica ever was.
Oh yeah.
And it was a tough life. He did some crazy stuff. He wasn't that liked, especially by the senators and the Praetorian Guard, which ultimately did him in.
Yeah, I'm going to say that the real Caligula was not as crazy as portrayed.
Well, I mean, I don't see why he necessarily. Well, I'm sure he probably wasn't as crazy as that, but I'm sure he was crazy.
He had to actually.
But everybody was crazy in those days.
Well, in the beginning 2 years of his reign, he was actually much loved by the people, and he actually did shit. He actually built.
He spent a lot of money.
He built aqueducts. Yeah, he did spend too much money.
Uh-huh.
He repaired roads. I think there was a conquest of.
And Tiberius was pretty hated by the time he dies.
Right. There was a conquest of, I think, North Africa, some kingdom of North Africa that he brought into the kingdom. He was fairly, I mean, they kind of make him to be as sort of a
little effeminate.
Well, yeah, he's every costume he wears could be would be a hit at any.
Those costumes are so not historically accurate.
Would be a hit at a pride parade. I think any one of those.
Everything's like just he him a loincloth and some incredibly sheer fabric.
My favorite,
And some gold.
Yeah, it was as if you had a Roman emperor as the sixth village person in the Village People. That was kind of like his costume through that. But in the movie, he seemed like he had no interest at all with governing Rome, when in actuality the real Caligula actually had to get some shit done.
But he had a tough childhood.
Oh.
I mean, he was basically raised in the army. I mean, that's why his name is Caligula.
Little boots.
Little boots, little soldier's boots, because he went around campaigning with his father.
In Germany.
What was his father's name? Germanicus, when he was a kid. And Germanicus may or may not have been killed by Tiberius, sort of unsure.
Yeah.
And all his brothers got killed.
Right.
And I don't know, who knows what his relationship with Tiberius was. It might have been sort of weird.
I think it wasn't probably as portrayed in the movie,
Yeah.
obviously, but a lot of things were obviously taken liberty with.
I love how Drusilla calls them little boots, though.
Little boots.
That
Yeah.
would be a great. Gene said this. Little boots, great name for a cat.
Oh yeah,
And then you could also call the cat Caligula.
Caligula.
I thought it was great. I swear to God, if I get a cat without a name, I might consider naming it Little Boots, especially if it has little white paws that some cats do.
Well, what I find shocking is that I don't find it shocking. I guess I find it amusing. Is that without the movie Caligula, I think the Roman Emperor Caligula would be just completely anonymous in
I don't know. I mean, he plays a
known only to historians, I think.
Maybe, but there weren't. I mean, after Julius Caesar, there weren't many emperors of this family line.
No, there was
only like 5 of them.
There was Julius Caesar, Augustus, Tiberius, and then Caligula, and then after Caligula was Claudius, and they make him out to be an idiot in the film.
And that was not the case.
But he wasn't actually. He was made fun of and, maybe bullied prior to becoming the Roman emperor. But when he became a Roman emperor, he was actually fairly pragmatic and accomplished. So he wasn't that kind of fat, sort of moronic character in the film.
Yeah, I think Caligula would just be upset of being called Caligula, his childhood nickname.
And yeah,
I think that's what he'd be most upset about.
Is being called
not being called his real name, Gaius, whatever.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard to put it in the full context of the whole Roman history here, but his reign was only 4 years, so he was.
Yeah, I mean, he made a lot of enemies in the Senate, and he ended up getting killed. It's sort of funny that I was reading some of the history, and he kills Macro not long after Macro makes him emperor,
which happened.
And
in
I guess
film.
in reality that it was pretty close to what happened in the movie, where basically Tiberius is smothered under.
The pillow. What was a pillow? Allegedly in history.
In history, it was some linens or something.
Which was how Marco kills Peter O'Toole's Tiberius. Macro kills Peter O'Toole's Tiberius in the film.
And historically, which may not be accurate, but the stories that are told is something similar happens. And that Caligula realizes that Macro is a little too powerful and offs him.
Yeah, because he was because he was lead of the guard and all that. Maybe let's talk a little bit about the violence in the film, which I thought was fairly subdued, but I think...
Well, that's another reason I picked that, talking about violence, picked that audio scene from earlier. I really loved the sound of Tiberius piercing that guard's stomach and the entrails and all that wine flowing out, because this is the early in the scene where Tiberius knows that one of his guards is drunk and ties his penis off and has him force feed him wine and later and jacks him.
It's like something you would do to
a lot of noises.
Like something you do in some sort of Chinese factory, but with an animal or something.
Well, I think that was the view of people. I don't think that the violence was so far off of reality.
Well, cutting off Proculus's penis and then throwing it at the guard dogs, seemed a little bit over the top, but
I don't see why. I mean, other than the fake penis they cut was obviously fake.
Oh,
terribly fake.
It was like foam rubber. It was pretty silly.
It was terrible artificial penis. But I don't see why that you say that violence. I don't see how the violence seemed not historically accurate. People are killing people left and right.
Oh, I just kind of wanted to talk about it in contrast with the explicit sex scenes. It didn't seem over the top to me. Actually, I've been watching Game of Thrones. I don't know if you've been watching Game of Thrones.
I did. I watched the first season.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, Game of Thrones...
A lot of bad acting in that darn thing.
Yeah, it's not too hot.
It's too bad.
Peter Dinklage is pretty much holding up the whole thing.
Dinklage is so... Yeah, he is holding up now that...
the entire series, almost. If it wasn't for him, I don't think I'd watch it. But,
well, there's also... the other guy who got his head chopped off in the next
Sean Bain.
What?
Bain? Is that Sean Bain?
Sean Bean.
Bean, yeah.
Yeah, Sean Bean was pretty good, too.
Yeah. But I was watching that, and I was like, there's a lot of smut and, fucking going on in Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's a snaky character in the King's Court that's very similar to the character.
Oh, the Longinus type of character? Yeah.
And it almost seems like he almost built him up after him. They're both called the Snake.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, except for obviously some gratuitous, close-ups of oral sex and penetration in Caligula. To me, it's like almost like
It's semen.
owns its heritage a little bit to Caligula, because it's almost on par in certain scenes with Caligula in Game of Thrones. And there was actually this
Just with Caligula, just has better sets.
yeah, better sets. It's actually, and in this season, there's a scene where they bring one of these knights up to fight in kind of these jousting tournaments for King Joffrey's amusement.
Oh, okay.
And
Yeah, Joffrey's sort of like a Caligula. I kept thinking about that first season because I had just seen it a couple weeks before we watched Caligula. There's a lot of weird echoes.
Well, and Game of Thrones, man, is packed with incest. You know, there's a lot of brother-sister action going on.
That's hot.
And I'm an only child, so you can say
I have no sisters.
yeah. So we can just joke about incest all day long.
Yeah, we can.
You know, to the cringes of our audience. But there was a scene where a knight shows up drunk, and then Joffrey goes to punish him by basically putting almost the same exact funnel into his mouth, and then started to pour wine down it. But they didn't get to the part where, you know,
He opened up his stomach.
You know, because something else was going on. I was like, well, that's pretty well borrowed. I mean, it looked almost exactly like that scene. So, say what you want about Caligula, it's definitely it ain't much of a you know, the apple didn't fall far from the smutty tree of the early 80s when you're watching Game of Thrones.
Well, have you seen any of the Spartacus stuff on Showtime?
No, I heard that's
like even more so.
Is it?
Oh, they got guys dongs left and right. They got a lot of dong action. No penetration, but lots of dongs. It's really it's almost homoerotic because they got some good-looking guys in that show.
And they're just...
And I'm only 5% gay. And they're pretty good-looking guys.
As opposed to my 3.5, 4.
Look, everybody's got a little gay in it.
That's right.
It just takes more beautiful men to excite that. But it's very similar, but more violence and more sex.
Sure.
And more wine.
Yeah. So, I mean, I enjoy Game of Thrones. I enjoyed Caligula. I own the DVD. So I guess, you know, as setting a precedent, it's not too much of an aberration these days because, you know, we're 30 years down the road, and obviously things become, you know, you get a little bit of the taboos of yesteryear are the norm of today in a lot of respects. You know,
well, I guess I'm having trouble seeing why people would be so upset with this film. First of all, what is wrong with this film? I don't see, other than it's got great set pieces, it has a few good turns. There's too much eating up the scenery by McDowell, probably.
Yeah.
But other than that, other than it being a little pedestrian and its storyline not maybe being as riveting as it could be, and the actress who played Drusilla's not that great, even though she's pretty hot. I just don't see what's wrong with the film. It's a solid 5 or 6 on a scale of 10 for me.
It's extremely watchable.
And other than being a little long, and it's probably because it's a special edition long cut, you could cut out 30 minutes out of this film, probably some of the more unnecessary pornography. And I think it's a pretty solid little action Roman political intrigue movie.
I like some of the I like the Longinus character, even though that sort of sounds like a STD, Longinus.
Oh, Longinus with the crazy
look like a zipper, zipper on top of his head.
He's a pretty fun character, you know. I mean, I'm sure there's nobody like that kissing a snake.
Yeah, I know. He like, you know, he kind of came into play there at the end, and he was orchestrating the assassination of him and the other the macro replacement who was and I forget his name. What was the
the guy who actually kills the Kyria,
yeah, because
Kyria actually killed him, historically killed him, and was executed shortly thereafter for killing
by Claudius or
by Claudius.
I don't think Longinus was an actual real life.
I have no idea, but yeah. Kyria was punished to death, and historically he was put to death with the same sword he killed Caligula with.
Oh, well, there you go. That's what goes around comes around.
See, the Praetorian Guard is actually pretty important in the history of the Roman Empire. I mean, when it changed not too long before this from the Republic, where you could never have armed soldiers in the city of Rome, now you have basically this small army, the Praetorian Guard, which basically is basically the sword that the emperor uses to stay in charge.
Well, yeah,
that's why Macro is so powerful. It's because he controls the Praetorian Guard. They're basically the muscle in the city.
Right. Well, you need them because if you were, and I don't know much about. I know, like, the Republic was basically comprised of senators who were landholders of Rome that would make consensus that would then rule the empire. Or not, it wasn't the empire; it was the Roman Republic, which happened to encompass a huge amount of territory. But once Julius Caesar took power, then the Senate was a rubber stamp Senate?
No, it was they still would drop the legislation. They do a lot of the busy work.
And then it was kind of a veto thing, right, with the emperor.
And he had the power of the Praetorian Guard, which I think was pretty important.
Well, and that was the deal. You need the guard in order to.
They're the muscle. Because violence really, I've always thought this, and I don't know who said it. I'm sure a million people have said it over history. Violence is really the true method by which power is established and action and power is exercised is by violence or the threat of it.
Sure.
And we get insulated way, way away from violence these days. But it's still, all power really derives from violence.
Well, we still have our Praetorians. I mean, we saw them in action recently. They're just armed with pepper spray and batons and zip ties.
Yeah, but there's so many controls on it.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the Praetorian Guard is very. That's why Macro is so powerful in reality, historically reality, and as displayed in this film.
So Caligula has Macro executed with that nice wall of spinning knives, which I thought was sort of an interest. I was kept thinking in the Roman era, if you could make a machine that would have enough torque to pull heads out of the ground like that.
All you need was a big flywheel. You just get a big stone flywheel. Once you get it going, there'd be huge amounts of energy in there.
So
they use flywheels pretty extensively.
So, like, maybe you could rig up like a miller's wheel.
Yeah, all you need is a big stone wheel. Once you get that spinning, nothing's going to slow it down.
Yeah.
You probably have to let it spin out on its own.
I thought that was a nicely done macabre scene. The whole wall of spinning knives.
I wonder if that has any basis in history. So would that piss people off? Is that what pissed Ebert off, do you think, that spinning beheading thing?
No, because I actually...
What pissed Ebert off?
Fuck, I don't know.
Why did Ebert walk out? The only thing I can think, the only scene that I found really disturbing was Caligula's rape of...
Olivia.
Yeah, Olivia at the wedding of... what was his name?
Patroclus.
Yeah, and his treatment of... And the anal rape.
He just goes all prima nocta on Olivia, and then he.
She was a virgin. It's how casually he wipes the blood off her genitals.
Right.
And you see, I think it's just a really well shot scene. And then he uses cream or butter on his fist,
and he just
anally rapes Proculus.
Yeah.
And then he looks at his hand. I swear to God, it looks like there's blood and shit on it. It does. I think it's supposed to look like blood and shit.
Yeah, and then he puts the little flower there when he's done.
That was disturbing.
That was a disturbing scene. Yeah.
It was disturbing, but would it be so disturbing that you'd walk out of a film?
Well, I'm trying. It was if we reconstruct the moment.
I guess I could read his rather lengthy review. I'm just saying, why would people hate this film?
Well, I mean,
people must have back in the day.
Well, Ebert hates it. He hated it and I'm trying to kind of skim the review here and try to figure out. I think he just thought it was in such poor taste, and taste is sort of a subjective thing.
There you go. I don't see what's in poor taste about this film. Is it the incest?
Well,
does that get people all worked up?
No. I think it was much more of high caliber actors debasing themselves in with the taint of pornography.
Oh. See, that's just bullshit. That's just bullshit. And if if that's what get Ebert all worked up because they took a couple of sleazy penthouse pets from 1980 and had them eat each other out while cutting it in, basically a rather explicit sex scene of Malcolm McDowell and Mirren. That's getting him all worked up. That gets his panties in a bunch.
Let's see. Let's just read a little cut here from Ebert's review. The film even fails to involve itself in the action. Caligula has been photographed and directed with such clumsiness and inelegance that pieces of action do not seem to flow together. The plot is incomprehensible. The events are frequently framed as if the camera was not sure where it was, and everything is shot in muddy, ugly, underlit dungeon tones. The music is wow, I don't even know this word. It's also execrable. Wow, he got me there.
Well, look, some of the principal photography is not that great, and I guess I thought the muddy tones were due to the transfer, but maybe it's not. Maybe it wasn't that well lit.
Well, there's some issues with the set, and one of them was the art director, the Federico Fellini's art director, Danilo Donati. Didn't have the shooting schedule was too compacted to have the sets built fully. So there was a lot of I don't know if you looked in the background, like through the windows or through the entryways, but there was almost kind of like a expressionism sort of paintings of like Roman backgrounds and stuff.
Oh, a lot of overuse of.
It was just sort of
matte paintings.
Expressionist. No, it wasn't even matte paintings. They were really muted, sort of.
Almost like a play.
Kind of like a play, and a lot of this movie was sort of filmed like a play. You got a big fourth wall feel to it. Everything was kind of pushed up against like you'd expect an audience.
I guess I thought that was just maybe the style of the director. Because you do see, especially in older films, where it is more like a staged performance.
I don't think maybe that's what they're trying to evoke. I don't know if they.
Or maybe that's just what their skill set was.
It's hard to tell.
It didn't seem to detract, and the storyline's confusing. The storyline's pretty straightforward, unless his edit was shit that he watched, and I guess I have no idea.
Well, let's just assume he was watching the same cut. I think it was pretty straightforward. I don't know. It's the story of Caligula, more or less. So it's, the rise and fall. There wasn't a lot of Byzantine plot lines. It didn't seem all that confusing.
He rose to power, and he got rid of some people, and he pissed off some people, and they killed him.
So he continues on here. So what are we left with? A movie, I am afraid, that may be invulnerable to a review like this one. There are no doubt people who believe that if this movie is as bad as I say it is, it must be worth seeing. People who simply cannot believe any film could be this vile. Some of those people are walking out of the Davis, which is the theater, before I did Saturday night. Others were sitting depressed in the lobby. That should not, I suppose, be surprising. Well,
it wasn't a great film.
When you use words like vile, I don't think you're giving it its critical due.
Yeah, that's okay. Look, Ebert's a man of passion, and his passions get the better of him.
He's no prude.
And I forgive Ebert for his passions. And there's no reason we shouldn't. He's a great man.
Yeah.
But, I sat down to this film. I literally had a full bottle of Milbrandt 2009 Cabernet Sauvignon.
Is that what?
Milbrandt? It's pretty good. I get it at Costco.
Should have been drinking Chianti, man.
And a plate full of pizza. I stacked a bunch of pizza on a plate. I sat down about halfway through this film. I had finished that bottle.
You were almost ready for the the retching room, the Roman retching room after that one.
Oh, maybe so. But maybe you do have to have a little booze in you to really gloss over the rough edges of this film.
Well, if you're seeing it like as sort of a stark, if you're frozen in a theater and you don't have any method of escape and no inebriation, maybe it might be a little bit putting you on edge. Feeling the discomfort in the theater. I don't know.
And maybe we just can't be offended by some of the explicit sex.
I want to talk about one thing before we ended the podcast, and it's one of my rants, and it's one of these things that you always hear about violence and sex, and why we're treated to such horrific violence during prime time, and
well, I think have we not talked about this before on the podcast?
Maybe not.
Probably in private.
Maybe, but why we're treated to such horrible, horrific crimes and violence in primetime TV shows, let alone movies, and sex we're all very still prudish about. And there was some asshole comment by somebody that said, "I'd rather have my children watch two people making love than two people killing each other." And I'm here just to cry bullshit on that comment because it's ridiculous. And one thing, it's about, people get, when kids get exposed to...
Now, did you say that the right way? He would rather have his child see two people making love on the television.
Making love.
Than see them killing each other.
Correct.
Okay.
And we're talking more about, because pornography, you don't want to put strip clubs or, they're less and less these days, but, porno theaters or porno stores, anywhere near an elementary school or a school in general.
Yeah.
Because kids don't want to be, they don't want to expose kids to anything sexual.
Okay.
And pornography, obviously, that's one of the big reasons that we don't, people are upset with the internet because, hell, 12-year-olds can go on and surf porn, if their parents are lazy.
Shit, I would have been doing it.
Oh, so would I. But the thing is the reason that we let kids watch violence and not sex or pornography is because children understand violence. They don't understand sex.
Okay.
And to explain violence to a 5-year-old is much easier than explaining sex to a 5-year-old.
Okay.
So when you're a parent, the abstract duty of attempting to explain pornography to a 5-year-old, while not an insurmountable chore, like if you caught your 5-year-old glimpsing pornography, you could, it's an uncomfortable one because you have to explain an abstract idea that children have is not in their realm.
Yeah, it's not in their realm. It's not in their realm of experience. They have no idea. I guess, yeah.
And so
violence is because we're violent right from the
right.
get-go.
So I think that's where the discomfort comes from. That's kind of my opinion.
I think it sounds pretty straightforward.
So I'm not justifying the fact that.
I guess I'm not sure why you're so upset by that guy's comment, other than he maybe should have just said, "I don't want my kids seeing two people murdering each other."
It's just this.
Maybe he finds both equally offensive.
It's just this.
What's so wrong about finding that?
It's like this hippie bullshit comment that's always drove me nuts. This piece.
I don't ever hear people making that comment.
I used to hear.
All I hear is people going, "Oh God, holy smokes!" about everything.
Well, yeah, you hear that, but it's been clouded over. But
what I hate? I hate unrealistic violence. I hate violence without the gore and the guts and the blood and the terror and the pain.
Yeah, we talked about that last podcast. Yeah, but I'm just kind of. It always seems like the crunchy hippie reactionary, fathers who talking about, "No, there's so much violence, and I'd rather have my two kids watch a couple making love than watch them." It's like bullshit on you. No, you don't. You don't want.
You're that excited about that?
Used to drive me nuts.
I mean, I don't know. I don't really give a shit, I guess.
Okay. I used to give a shit, but I just thought I'd bring it up.
I think you have to have kids to give a shit about that stuff.
Well, I understand the need to shelter children from pornography much more than sheltering them from explicit violence. That's all I'm saying. So, I'm not defending the hypocrisy of American culture. I'm just saying it makes sense.
They should find out about sex like everybody does, all by themselves at about 11 years old.
That's right. That's usually when it happens. Yeah. Let's call it for what it is.
Be quite honest, I just don't give it much thought. It sounds like a big pain in the ass. And that's just part of the pain in the ass of parenting children.
Birds and the bees conversations.
Well, just the whole business, protecting them from violence. I mean, you can't be violent these days, yet you see portrayals of violence everywhere. I mean, I don't go force-feeding people wine and then cutting their stomach open.
Sure.
Though it'd be a pretty simple matter. You know where the stomach is. You give a sword. I could
right.
open some guy's stomach as easily as the next person.
Yeah. Well,
and if I was in a position of absolute power like that, I'd probably do stuff like that. I mean, what the hell?
if there was no consequences for anything.
If there's no consequences,
and you're desensitized to it.
and people are just only so much meat, it doesn't seem that strange to me.
Well, and they're disposable, obviously. If you're a Roman emperor, you can,
I just love the scene. I guess I just really like Peter O'Toole with all the sores over his face.
He has like syphilis, I think.
Is that what he has? Anyways, I think he has the perfect portrayal. He's so tired of everything. He's so sick and tired of it. I love when he sort of he tries to poison Caligula with the poisoned wine, almost like as a aside. Just wow, what the hell? See what happens. And then Caligula definitely avoids it without offending Tiberius by giving it to Gemella, his sort of adopted grandson or whatever. And then just the slightest hint of dismay over Peter O'Toole's face when he saw that Caligula had sidestepped him.
Yeah.
He just gives it to his nubile black taster who just eats it and falls over dead and nobody even notices.
Yeah, they just they step over. Yeah. Remember, like she dies. And
macro steps right over.
Yeah,
I just thought that was just the subtlety of the just how cheap human life is, especially in those times, and how it still is these days, even though we don't see it around us.
Well, it's cheap. It's just cheap in other countries.
It's cheap far away where we send the children of the poor to go fight our wars.
That's right. Yeah, that's another conversation. Maybe bring that up during a war movie or something. So let's wrap this up. Any last thoughts on Caligula?
I guess in the sense we ended up talking about the thing that gets people all worked up, the pornography.
Yeah.
And when you get past that, maybe Peter O'Toole's performance, it's not that great of a movie, and so there's really not that much to talk about.
Not really, no.
I mean, we talk about why are people so upset about the pornography, but without that, people probably wouldn't give a shit about this film.
No, it would have tanked and gone away. And
the only reason it's of interest is because it's this incredibly uncommon hybrid.
Right.
But in the end, you're left without this sort of interesting hybrid aspect to it. It's really like a made-for-TV costume
drama. Yeah, it would have been what Gore Vidal's original vision would have been, which would have been the modestly budgeted historic drama that nobody would have watched and nobody gave a shit about.
Well, you might have come across it and it would have been interesting.
Yeah, you would have had to watch it in like history class or something.
So at the end, once we were done talking about pornography, there's not a whole lot to talk about.
No. Some violence. We talked about the violence.
Oh, I thought the violence was nicely done.
Right.
So, in the end, would you recommend people watch this film?
No. I would say...
maybe just as an interesting cultural side, but it is 2.5 hours.
And
I would recommend you sit down with a bottle of wine and watch this movie.
I did not. I watched it. I think it was so long I had to watch it like in sections.
Oh, I powered through this bitch last night. Me, a bottle of wine, pizza, and then a half pot of coffee.
You're a man.
About halfway through it.
You had some commitment. I think if somebody mentioned Caligula in passing, I would say, hey, I have the DVD. Do you want to borrow it? That's as far as my recommendation would go.
I mean, I guess it maybe hits the cult. I mean, I guess certainly by its the unusual nature of this film, it has to be a cult film. And I guess if you really want to see cult films of the latter half of the 20th century, this definitely has to be in the mix.
It's unique unto itself.
There's nothing about cult films that say they have to be good.
Right. No.
And this movie's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. And it's just you expect a certain thing of historical epics like Spartacus, and you expect a certain thing of pornography, and when you marry the two, and you get something else, you tend to, I guess, criticize it from both of those perspectives, and you're not. And that's kind of what happened with this. Is people are like, it's like, well, they took a historical movie and then they sort of trashed it with porno, and then, I'm sure the porno auteurs didn't really care about it, but so
it's in the sense I'd never need to watch this film again.
No, I think I'm done.
We've been goofing around with dorky films the last 2 or 3 weeks, and
dorky films. We thought
not dorky films, but films that maybe like so this week we had Caligula, which was interesting but not a good film necessarily,
Right.
And the week before, I always forgot what we've been doing.
we did Battle Royale.
Battle Royale, which interesting film, sort of timely.
Well, we thought it might have been good.
And I didn't think it was that great.
Shining was good though.
The week before we did The Shining, which is a great film.
So we're gonna go.
I guess 2 weeks. 2 weeks of films that aren't that great. I want a good film.
So we're gonna watch a good film, and I've seen the American version of this, which is Let Me In, which I enjoyed quite a bit, but it was a remake. So we're gonna go ahead and watch the 2008 Swedish version of the same movie, or the original version, Let the Right One In, which is a vampire story about a young girl, I guess.
Yeah, I like vampires and kids killing kids.
Sure.
I think we're going down the right path here.
Let's dial this one in. So that's next week's movie. And
this is available on Netflix, by the way.
And Netflix Instant, if you want to give it a
Because
watch.
I am canceling my next Netflix account.
Yep.
And this is my last straw of Netflix.
It's Mark's coup de grace. He's done with Netflix Instant. I can't say I blame him. So, all right. Until then, until next week, talk to you later.
Bye-bye.